People often associate Europe with wonderful society, lovely cities, peaceful borders, and prosperity. But just like everywhere else in the world, Europe also experiences hardship and poverty. With a total land size of 10,180,000 square miles, Europe is the second smallest continent in the world after Australia. According to the United Nations, Europe consists of 44 nations. During both World Wars I and II, Europe's economy suffered greatly. During the Cold War, some countries in Central and Eastern Europe gave in to Russian pressure and created COMECON, or the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. The majority of other nations that chose free market policies received significant financing from the US. To integrate their economies, many Western European nations founded the European Union. This increased cross-border trade and helped their economies, whereas COMECON nations are still having difficulty. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, a large number of nations joined the European Union when communist control was overthrown in Eastern European nations. The European Union has one of the top 5 economies in the world as of now. While many nations in Europe are still in poverty, there are plenty that are extremely prosperous. In our video today, we'll talk about the poorest nations in Europe according to GDP per capita as of 2022, according to information from the International Monetary Fund. So, grab that popcorn and let's get this show started. 20. The Czech Republic, formerly known as Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was liberated from communist rule in 1989 by the so-called Velvet Revolution, and it then began the process of transforming its command economy into a free market one. A program based on the government's policies of price liberalization, market opening to foreign trade and investment, internal currency convertibility, privatization of state-owned firms, and tax reform was implemented. Although both the Czech Republic and Slovakia succeeded the federal state, the Czechs had a clear edge over the Slovaks due to historical economic disparities. Slovakia, with its mineral riches and hydroelectric potential, became a significant producer of armaments for the former communist countries of Eastern Europe as a result of rigid economic compartmentalization under COMECON. The Czech Republic's economy, on the other hand, was more diverse and stable, which was a result of both its more hospitable terrain and the long-standing dominance of Czechs in the federal government. The GDP per capita of the Czech Republic is $22,143. 19. Portugal. When Portugal's colonial empire in Asia, Africa, and South America was at its height, it was the richest nation on earth. Portugal, however, progressively declined into one of Western Europe's poorest nations in the 19th and 20th centuries, as a result of this income not being invested in the construction of domestic industrial infrastructure. After the Portuguese Revolution in the middle of the 1970s, Portugal's economy began to shift away from its last remaining African overseas territories and back toward Europe. Early in the 21st century, economic growth had significantly risen earnings, improved living standards, and decreased unemployment. In addition, significant inflows of structural funding, private capital, and direct investment have supported and sustained development since Portugal's EU membership. However, Portugal was one of the nations most severely impacted by the Eurozone financial crisis that broke out in 2009, and a slew of government initiatives failed to stop the nation's economic collapse. Portugal received a $116 billion rescue package from the EU and the IMF in 2011, but only if they adopted stringent austerity measures. The GDP per capita of Portugal is $22,439. 18. Lithuania. The Lithuanian government started a program to dismantle the Soviet economic system even before the country's formal declaration of independence from the USSR. The legislation was passed to allow privatization starting on February 1991. The government's goals were hampered by complications, though. First and foremost, the majority of Lithuania's trade was still intimately connected to the former Soviet Union's republics, which were also experiencing severe economic collapse. The GDP per capita of Lithuania is $19,900. 17. Slovakia. The lack of celebration that greeted Slovakia's rebirth in 1993 was partly an admission of economic reality. Although the idea of Slovak political autonomy was widely supported, many Slovaks believed it could be disastrous to pursue it outside the Federation's relatively secure environment. Others contended that the Czech area would benefit from the federated Czechoslovakia's transition to a market economy. Geographical and historical factors, such as the communist-era's central planning, had left Slovakia more rural and less economically varied than its Czech neighbor, which had a population that was about double that of Slovakia. In reality, Slovakia's privatization process moved far more slowly than the Czech Republic's when the communist dictatorship fell in 1989. The GDP per capita of Slovakia is $19,150. 16. Greece. Although Greece's economy had remarkable expansion during World War II, it has continued to be among the least developed in the EU. The nation's natural resources are scarce, modernization has been gradual, and its balance of payments has been problematic. The cornerstones of the economy are shipping, tourism, and remittances from expatriate workers, the last of which has been progressively declining. Although the Greek economy has always been founded on free business, many areas of the economy are now directly or indirectly under government control thanks to the banks. The GDP per capita of Greece is $17,630. 15. Latvia. In the late 20th century, Latvia had the highest level of industrialization among the Baltic states. Industrialization in Latvia started in the second half of the 19th century. After gaining its independence in 1991, Latvia had significant economic changes as it shifted to a market economy. The economy began to diversify in the middle of the 1990s, and by the start of the 2000s, the majority of Latvia's industries had undergone privatization. The GDP per capita of Latvia is $17,669. 14. Hungary. Hungary is the 14th poorest nation in Europe, with a GDP per capita of $15,370, according to the ranking. Hungary's economy was mostly based on agriculture before World War II. Later forced industrialization policies, which were influenced by Soviet models, altered the nation's economic structure. Even though it experienced fast expansion as a result of economic modernization, it was based on antiquated technologies. Heavy industries like iron, steel, and engineering were prioritized above new tech areas like contemporary infrastructure, services, and communication. More than half of all foreign direct investment in Central and Eastern Europe was attracted to Hungary in the early 1990s as a result of the country's liberal foreign investment legislation. Nowadays, Hungary has a developed economy. Hungary's excellent soil and the accessibility of water resources in its central and eastern areas are among its most valuable natural resources. Before the global epidemic, Hungary welcomed more than 15.8 million foreign visitors annually. 13. Poland. A total of 312,000 square kilometers of Poland, formerly known as the Republic of Poland, had a $15,300 per capita GDP. With a population of around 38.5 million, Poland is one of the most populous countries in the European Union. Polish markets are now developed and rank 6th in terms of purchasing power parity. Poland is currently the market with the quickest rate of growth, with 60% of its labor force employed in the service sector and the remaining 40% in industry and agriculture. 12. Romania. The GDP per person in Romania, which gets its name from the Latin term Romanus, is $14,400. Early in the new millennium, Romania saw strong economic growth, which is currently largely driven by the service industry. Romania produces electric energy and machines, and it has become a net exporter of both. 11. Croatia. With a GDP per capita of $14,030, Croatia, formerly known as the Republic of Croatia, is the 11th poorest nation in Europe. The total land area of Croatia is 56,400 square kilometers. In 1991, when tensions increased and erupted into war, Croatia was just beginning its reform towards privatization and its transition to a free market economy. Because of the war, Croatia's lucrative tourism sector suffered significant economic losses, which reduced GDP by more than 40%. If you're still watching this video, then take out 1 second to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. This helps us reach more people with our educative content. 10. Bulgaria. Bulgaria is the 10th poorest nation in Europe, with a GDP per capita of $11,300. Bulgaria attempted to turn itself into a free market democratic economy when it lost its Soviet primary market in the 1990s, which severely hurt the country's economy. Bulgarian society was significantly impacted by the country's quick industrialization following World War II and the economic upheaval it endured with the fall of the communist dictatorship. Early in the 1990s, pricing regulations were loosened, which resulted in a significant increase in prices. Inflation increased as a result, and strikes increased in frequency. There have been periods of high unemployment and reduced social services as a result of the private sector's growing pains and the severe financial discipline needed to reduce the enormous foreign debt. With the help of foreign financial institutions, the Bulgarian government sought economic stability in this environment, and by the end of the decade, inflation had significantly decreased thanks to the implementation of the currency board in 1997, as well as other measures. During the global financial crisis of 2008, Bulgaria was once more severely impacted. According to IMF data, more than 41% of Bulgaria's population is at risk of living in poverty, making the country's economy fragile. 9. Serbia. Yugoslavia adopted a socialist economic system in 1945 that was based on Soviet Union institutions, but after it broke with the Communist Information Bureau in 1948, a system that gave more room for individual entrepreneurship developed. The majority of farmers were organized into collective farms up until 1953, when this unpopular practice was abandoned. The institution persisted mostly in Serbia's former German estates in the Vojvodina, where the regime had relocated refugees from Serbia and Montenegro's hilly regions. With a GDP per capita of $8,740, Serbia ranks 9th among the poorest nations in Europe. Beginning in the early 2000s, Serbia saw 8 years of strong economic development. Due to the global financial crisis, Serbia's economy saw negative growth in 2009, which caused the country's external debt to increase to 63.8% of GDP. Natural calamities like earthquakes and floods are common in Serbia, which affect on the nation's economic development. 8. Montenegro. The GDP per person of Montenegro, which is heavily dependent on the energy sector, is $8,070. Rapid urbanization causing deforestation is degrading the nation's natural resources and increasing its vulnerability. Income inequality, particularly for women, is a result of widespread gender and age discrimination. Despite having only a small amount of land with good soil and a temperate climate, farming predominated in Montenegro's economy until the middle of the 20th century. 2/5 of the land that is cultivated, which makes up less than 1/10 of the total, is used for growing cereals. Shepherding is the primary agricultural activity in upland areas. In Montenegro, where forests make up more than 2/5 of the country, forestry is significant commercially. Despite the nation's extensive seacoast, little commercial fishing is done there. There are nearly 50,000 refugees and internally displaced people living in Montenegro. The poverty rate in Montenegro is around 6 times higher than the 8.6% national average. 7. Belarus. Following the fall of the USSR, Belarus experienced severe economic difficulties, similar to those experienced by its former Soviet republics, making it the 7th poorest nation in Europe. The Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic was devastated during World War II, and the intense post-war effort to rebuild the economy led to a sizable industrial sector that was dependent on the other Soviet republics, mainly Russia, for energy and raw materials. Along with significantly raising the price of those raw resources, the collapse of the Soviet Union also weakened the traditional market for Belarusian-produced goods. Early in the 1990s, Belarus saw a decline in production as a result. Additionally, Belarus' transition to a market economy was slower than that of other former Soviet republics. In the years after independence, only a small portion of state-run industry and agriculture were privatized. Before 1990, Belarus had the highest standard of living, and its economy was booming. Belarus experienced an economic catastrophe up until 1996, when it began to recover. Belarus has a GDP per person of $6,060. 6. Bosnia and Herzegovina. With a per capita GDP of $6,500, Bosnia and Herzegovina, also known as B&H, is the sixth poorest nation in Europe. Bosnia's wartime history is the main contributor to poverty there. Before the Bosnian War, commonly known as the conflict between Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992 to 1995, the economy of Bosnia was thriving. It took the nation 20 years to go back to normal. Since many men were killed fighting, 1/4 of Bosnian households are now headed by women. There is a wage gap where women are paid less than men, which has led to the destitution of many families. 5. North Macedonia. The fifth poorest nation in Europe is North Macedonia, which attained independence in 1991. Recently, the economy of North Macedonia, which has a GDP per capita of $6,096, has undergone a significant change. The GDP of the nation is primarily derived from trade. The North Macedonian government has successfully implemented reforms, although the country still has a high unemployment rate of 16.6%. North Macedonia once had an unemployment rate of 38.7%. 4. Albania. Albania has gained a reputation for being isolationist due to a constitutional clause that forbade the government from accepting loans from outside, or admitting foreign investment. Before 1991, a succession of 5-year plans was used to guide the whole economy of Albania by the Communist Party in power. Agriculture was collectivized, the industry was nationalized, and private enterprise was severely prohibited. All means of production were under state control. The GDP per person in Albania, commonly known as the Republic of Albania, is $5,370. Following the fall of the USSR in the 1990s, Albania was in the process of converting its economy from one based on socialism to one based on free markets. The abundance of natural resources in Albania, including limestone, iron, coal, and natural gas, assists the country's economic recovery. Albania, which spans an area of 28,700 square kilometers, is today a developing nation with a manufacturing and service-based economy. 3. Kosovo. Kosovo, formerly known as the Republic of Kosovo, is a state that is only partially recognized and has a $5,022 per capita GDP. 1/3 of the population of Kosovo, which is the third poorest nation in Europe, lives in poverty. It suggests that 550,000 people live in poverty and make less than €500 per month in absolute terms. As of 2020, Kosovo has a very high unemployment rate of more than 30%. However, since the country is presently developing and has recently experienced economic growth, this number is anticipated to decline in the years to come. 2. Ukraine. With a GDP per capita of $3,400, in second place on the list of the poorest nations in Europe is Ukraine. Following the fall of the USSR, Ukraine, which had previously been a part of the USSR, experienced a recession. More than 850,000 people have been internally displaced as a result of the ongoing war in Ukraine throughout the years, and an estimated 3 million Ukrainians need humanitarian relief urgently. On February 24, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued an order for military intervention in eastern Ukraine. More than 1.3 million individuals have left Ukraine as a result of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, one of the fastest migration rates ever in such a short period. Unjustified fatalities, extensive infrastructure damage, and extensive internal and international migration were all effects of the war. The US and its allies have slapped harsh economic penalties on Russia, but they have refused to provide Ukraine any military assistance because it is not a member of NATO or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. 1. Moldova. With a GDP per capita of only $3,300, Moldova, also known as the Republic of Moldova, is the poorest country in Europe. Romania and Ukraine share a border with Moldova. The Moldova River is the source of the name Moldova. Following the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, Moldova, a former Soviet republic, saw a rapid deterioration in its economy and had to deal with significant financial challenges for its inhabitants. The drop in industrial and agricultural productivity was caused by several issues, including poor social policy decisions and food insecurity, among others. Over the past 2 decades, the number of people living in poverty has decreased thanks in part to the services sector, which has grown more slowly but now accounts for more than 60% of the country's GDP. These were the 20 poorest countries in Europe in 2022. Thanks for watching this video to the end. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can be a member of our growing community of touristers here on The New Tourist. See you in another one.